Why would a prestigious hospital keep one of its ICU rooms perpetually empty? For Dr. Eris Thorne, discovering the truth behind room 407 was a matter of life, death, and a justice a century overdue. Ready for the story? First, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like. Leave a like and comment below where you're listening from. Now, take a final deep breath. You're going to need it. There are moments that redefine a person's understanding of life and death by revealing a reality far deeper and more disturbing than ever imagined. For 8 months I have carried the weight of such a moment, and only now, settled in my new position at Northwood Regional Hospital just 300 meters from Blackwood Manor Asylum, have I found the courage to put these events into words. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and with 6 years of experience in critical care, I thought I had seen it all. Before that night in March, I prided myself on a rational, scientific approach to medicine, where my ability to remain calm under pressure and my unwavering dedication to patient care were the cornerstones of my career. I had witnessed death countless times, held the hands of the dying, and guided souls on their final journey, so I believed I understood the boundary between life and the great beyond, but I was wrong. The events I am about to recount took place during my first night shift in the intensive care unit at Blackwood Manor Asylum, a 150-year-old institution in the heart of downtown Oakhaven. I had transferred from the cardiac unit at City General Hospital, seeking new challenges in one of the state's most prestigious ICUs, unaware that Blackwood Manor Asylum's reputation extended into far darker territories. Descriptive all, uneasy Prestia Cell was an imposing Victorian structure built in 1873, with tall, somber windows that seemed to watch over the city like ancient, knowing eyes. The ICU was situated in the oldest part of the hospital, on the 4th floor of the original building, with 12 private rooms arranged around a central nursing station whose thick walls seemed to absorb sound and create an unsettling silence I should have paid more attention to. Casual neutral. My first shift, on Tuesday, March 15th, began like any other when I arrived at 6:45 p.m. for my 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. rotation. Professional. Observant. The day nurse. Nurse Eleanor Vance, a woman in her 50s with over 2 decades of service at Blackwood Manor Asylum, handled the handover. While she was competent and professional, a nervous energy hummed beneath her surface, with an eagerness to leave that I found peculiar. As we walked the unit, she informed me I would be working with Dr. Croft tonight, and that he had been there almost as long as she had. A good doctor who was very thorough, but had his particular ways. Routine, focused. The patient census was light, with only 8 patients in the 12-bed unit, and Eleanor gave me a detailed report on each one. It was when we reached room 407 that her voice shifted to become formal and distant, stating the room was currently empty and had been that way for 3 weeks because Dr. Croft preferred to keep it empty unless they were at full capacity. Inquisitive, I asked why. My curiosity piqued, and Eleanor hesitated, with a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. She explained there had been complications with that room, mostly equipment malfunctions. As for me, I continued working at Blackwood Manor Asylum, K. But my experience fundamentally changed my understanding of what it means to be a nurse. I learned that our profession carries not only the responsibility to provide excellent patient care, solemn, dedicated, but also the sacred obligation to speak up when we witness wrongdoing. I often work in the Amelia Hayes Memorial Room now. Gentle, comforting, and find it to be one of the most peaceful spaces in the hospital. Patients report feeling comforted and protected, as if a gentle presence watches over them with compassion. Sometimes late at night, I think I catch a glimpse of a figure in white moving silently through the corridors. It's not a frightening sight, but a reassuring one, like a guardian angel making her rounds. I believe it's Amelia, finally at peace with her mission of caring for patients, continuing in a different form. That night taught me that the boundary between life and death is not as absolute as we believe, and sometimes the dead have important messages for the living. Amelia Hayes waited over a century to tell her story, to ensure that the truth was finally revealed. Her story is a powerful reminder that healthcare is built on a foundation of trust that must be honored and defended, even when it is difficult. Darkest thing I witnessed that night was not a supernatural manifestation, but the cold, hard realization that people in power had deliberately harmed vulnerable patients and buried their crimes. But in that darkness, I also witnessed something beautiful, steady uplifting the power of truth to heal old wounds, and the enduring strength of the human spirit to seek justice, even from beyond the grave. Amelia Hayes' story is now part of Blackwood Manor Asylum's official history, taught to every new employee, remembered in every patient interaction. Her legacy ensures the mistakes of the past are never repeated. Determined, inspiring, and the principles she died defending continue to guide our profession. In the end, my first night as an ICU nurse taught me that being a healthcare professional means being part of something larger than ourselves. The tradition of service, compassion, and unwavering ethical responsibility. Solemn, respectful, Amelia Hayes showed me this tradition is worth protecting, worth fighting for. Firm, resolute, and if necessary, worth dying for. Her story is a testament to the fact that in healthcare, can be buried for a time, but it will always find a way to surface. Steady, inspiring, and when it does, it has the power to heal. Not only the living, but also the dead, who have waited patiently for justice. The Amelia Hayes Memorial Room now stands as a testament to the courage of one nurse who refused to remain silent. Every time I walk past that room, I remember Amelia's words from her final journal entry. Solved solen quaisment beware false to conleys, the tiftation look of the genie datin with tif lost funding 90 finik yorgi. A sombering reminder that trust, once broken, can take generations to rebuild. That the effort to rebuild it is always worthwhile. Calm. Thank you so much for listening to Amelia Hayes' story. I hope it touched you as much as it touched me. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing to the channel for more. Don't forget to like and share this video to help spread Amelia's message of courage and truth. Your support means the world and helps keep these important stories alive. Until next time, take care, and remember, truth has the power to heal. Amelia Hayes' legacy extends far beyond the walls of Blackwood Manor Asylum. Her story has been shared at medical conferences, published in nursing journals, and included in textbooks on medical ethics. Respectful, inspirational, she has become a symbol of the nurse as patient advocate, steadfast, dedicated, a healthcare professional who places moral principles above personal safety or career advancement. Hopeful, profound, the transformation of Room 407 from a place of fear and unrest. Serene Civitium, Ficetidwi Finidetiwicanethicamentustil. The power of truth and acknowledgement. Earnest, when we honor those who have suffered injustice. Quiet, respectful, when we tell their stories and learn from their experiences. Steady, we create the possibility for healing and redemption. Amelia's spirit found peace, not through supernatural intervention. Sincere, powerful act of having her story told and her sacrifice recognized. As I conclude this account, I want to emphasize, these events are not merely a ghost story. Earnest, profound, they are a testament to the enduring power of moral conviction. Steadfast, responsible, the importance of professional ethics. Duty-bound, and the responsibility we all bear to protect the vulnerable and voiceless. Amelia Hayes' story challenges us to examine our own practices, our willingness to speak up, determined and committed, and our commitment to the principles that should guide our profession. Being a healthcare professional is not just a job, steady, devoted, but a calling to heal, to protect, to advocate, and to ensure the trust patients place in us is never betrayed. Darkest thing I witnessed during my first night as an ICU nurse was not a ghostly apparition, but the chilling realization that people sworn to do no harm had deliberately harmed patients, then covered up their crimes. But in that darkness, I found a light. Truth finally revealed, justice finally served, respectful honoring, and a courageous nurse's legacy finally honored. Quiet, personal, Amelia Hayes' story is now part of my story. Steady, inspirational, and through me, it becomes part of the stories of all the patients I care for and the nurses I mentor. Her spirit lives on, not as a restless ghost haunting a hospital room, but as an inspiration to all of us to uphold the highest standards of our profession. To never forget that our first duty is always to those we serve. Earnest. In the end, perhaps the most important lesson of all is this: the dead can indeed teach the living. Justice delayed is not always justice denied. The truth, no matter how long it takes to emerge, will always find a way to set us free. Quiet Amelia Hayes waited over a century for her story to be told. Her patience was rewarded, her sacrifice honored, hopeful, enduring, and her legacy will endure for generations to come. I have shared Amelia's story with nursing students, new employees, and anyone who will listen. Her experience serves as a powerful lesson. Our profession requires not just clinical competence but moral courage. We must be willing to question authority when patient safety is at stake, attentive, responsible to document concerns thoroughly, steady, brave, and to speak up even when it's uncomfortable or dangerous to do so. Serious, informed, and dark, disturbing, were part of a broader pattern of unethical medical research common in that era. Patients, especially the poor, elderly, and vulnerable, were often used as test subjects without consent. Amelia Hayes's meticulous documentation provided crucial historical evidence. Her work helped the medical community understand the vital importance of informed consent and ethical oversight. Her story highlights the critical role nurses play in patient advocacy. As healthcare professionals who spend the most time at the bedside, nurses are often first to notice when something is wrong. Amelia's courage in documenting and reporting concerns, even at great personal risk, solemn honoring exemplifies the highest ideals of nursing. The Amelia Hayes Foundation for Medical Ethics has grown significantly. Optimistic, committed, it funds research into patient advocacy, supports whistleblower protections, and offers educational programs on medical ethics. Respectful, hopeful, it also awards healthcare professionals who demonstrate exceptional courage protecting patient rights and safety. Amelia's journal has become one of the most requested items in the medical school library. Students of ethics, nursing history, and patient advocacy regularly reference her detailed records. The room that once harbored dark secrets has transformed into a place of healing and hope. Patients who stay in the Amelia Hayes Memorial Room often comment on the peaceful atmosphere, feeling protected and cared for, with restful sleep and comfort they can't explain. Observant, optimistic nursing staff have noticed a shift in practice since Amelia's story became known. Steady, inspired. There's renewed emphasis on patient advocacy, a greater willingness to question questionable orders, and a stronger sense of professional duty. Amelia's legacy fosters a culture where speaking up for patients is not just encouraged but expected. I often reflect on that night and the profound lessons about justice, truth, and responsibility. Amelia Hayes's spirit was trapped not by supernatural forces, solemn, heavy, but by the crushing weight of untold truth and unacknowledged injustice. Her restlessness was not malevolent, but desperate, from someone who witnessed terrible wrongs and died before setting them right. Ominous, purposeful. The manifestations in room 407, the temperature drops, equipment malfunctions, apparitions, it's quiet, were not random hauntings, but purposeful communications. Amelia was trying to draw attention to hidden evidence of the crimes she documented, to ensure that the truth would eventually come to light. Her persistence, spanning more than a century, shows the power of moral conviction, steady, to transcend even death itself. In my current position at Northwood Regional Hospital, I carry Amelia's story every day. When I encounter troubling situations or feel pressure to remain silent, think of Amelia Hayes and her unwavering commitment to patients. Her example gives me courage to speak up, ask difficult questions, and put patient safety above all else. The medical profession has come a long way since 1918. We now have institutional review boards, informed consent procedures, and whistleblower protections.
Amelia's story reminds us these safeguards are only as strong as the people willing to use them.
Progress in medical ethics requires constant vigilance and courage to act when wrongdoing is witnessed. At 11:30 p.m., we made our way to room 407, tense, focused. Dr. Croft had brought tools from the maintenance department. As we stood before the patched section of wall, I felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. When Dr. Croft began to carefully remove the outer layer of drywall, eerie, chilling, the temperature in the room immediately began to plummet. Astonished. More significantly, the cardiac monitor flickered to life, displaying a heart rhythm despite not being connected to a patient. Leo whispered in hushed disbelief that it was showing a normal sinus rhythm. Impossible. As Dr. Croft continued, the rhythm began to show irregularities. Anxious, we were watching someone's heart respond to stress or excitement. Focused, determined. Finally, he broke through the last layer of plaster and revealed a small cavity. Inside was a wooden box, carefully wrapped in oiled cloth. Silent, tense, subtle. The temperature began to rise. Inside the box, we found a leather-bound journal, a silver locket, a fountain pen, and a folded letter. Dr. Croft opened the journal and began to read Amelia's entries from September 1918. Dark, ominous. What we discovered was a horror far greater than any ghost story. Amelia had meticulously documented a systematic pattern, killing experimental treatments administered to influenza patients without their knowledge or consent. Ominous Walvenargasalis Mesudaturobeguine sign, os tondelaid maintrabald Shreedley, as in Nagrada Bicomordis Pola. The most vulnerable patients were used as test subjects. Amelia's final entry, dated October 13, 1918, was the most damning. Intense, urgent, she wrote that she could no longer remain silent. Dr. Blackwood's experiments had killed at least 30 patients she had documented, people who might have survived with proper care, but instead were sacrificed to dangerous treatments he knew were deadly. Amelia had compiled detailed records of each case and intended to present them to the hospital and state medical boards. She had hidden copies in case something happened to her. Dark and ominous for Dr. Blackwood had become suspicious, and she feared he might silence her. The folded letter was addressed to the state medical board, dated October 14, 1918, the day before her death. A formal complaint requesting an immediate investigation, Clara said quietly, voice thick with sorrow. She was murdered. They gave her the influenza deliberately to silence her. I said she died trying to protect her patients. Somber, respectful, as a wave of admiration and sorrow washed over me. Dr. Finch had ensured her evidence was buried with her. Dr. Croft carefully placed the items back in the box. Determined, inspiring. He said, "We will do what Amelia couldn't. We will tell her story and make sure the truth is known." Focused, methodical. Over the next several hours, we documented everything we found. Dr. Croft contacted the hospital's current chief of staff to explain and request a meeting with the board. As dawn approached, we returned Amelia's belongings to room 407. But this time, we placed them in a position of honor on the windowsill, where they could be seen and remembered. The change in the room was immediate and profound. The oppressive atmosphere that haunted room 407 for decades was gone, replaced by a sense of peace and quiet. Hopeful, honoring, 3 weeks later, Blackwood Manor Asylum held a ceremony. They honored Amelia Hayes's memory and acknowledged the injustices of the 1918 pandemic. A plaque was installed in room 407, telling her story and recognizing her courage. Respectful, hopeful, the room was officially renamed the Amelia Hayes Memorial Room. The hospital also established the Amelia Hayes Foundation for Medical Ethics, donating her journal to the medical school's library as a teaching tool. He pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping dated October 1918. Leon Syria's focused peeled the headline read, "Local nurse dies in service to flu victims." Her name was Amelia Hayes. She was only 28 and had worked at the hospital for 6 years, before she contracted influenza caring for patients in the isolation ward. She died after just 3 days. I studied the photograph that accompanied the article, a young woman in a white uniform, dark hair, eyes full of compassion, and something else, something serious. The article mentioned she died in room 407, but Dr. Croft said there was more to the story. Ominous, reverent. He pulled out an older handwritten document, a journal entry from Dr. Alistair Finch, the chief of medicine during the pandemic. It was dated October 15, 1918, and it told a chilling tale. Amelia Hayes died that morning after a brave fight with the influenza. Hushed, tensile, hours delirious with fever, she kept saying she had to tell someone something, that there was something hidden, something that needed to be found. She clutched a piece of paper, but the writing had faded beyond recognition. Dr. Finch had sealed her personal effects inside the wall of her room as a memorial. I looked up at Dr. Croft, and the pieces clicked together with a horrifying clarity. Creepy, slow, that patched section of wall in room 407 held Amelia Hayes's secret, sealed away for over a century. Dr. Croft believed she'd been trying to communicate something ever since. When I asked what he thought she wanted to say, he closed the folder with a grim expression. He said, "I don't know, but it's time we found out." The rest of the night passed in a blur. Haunted, reflective, my mind was consumed by Amelia Hayes and the mystery of room 407. As dawn approached, Dr. Croft asked me a question that would change everything. Would I help him investigate, to understand what Amelia was trying to say? Despite my exhaustion and the fear that gnawed at my bones, I nodded. Purposeful, I said yes, because I felt we owed it to her and to the future. "Quiet," he said. "Meet me tomorrow night at 11 p.m. We're going to open that wall." The next evening, I arrived early. Dr. Croft was waiting with Leo Martinez and Clara Jenkins. He told me he had invited them because if we were going to do this, steady, focused, we needed to do it right. Researching, inquisitive, he'd spent the day researching Amelia Hayes's background, unearthing more documents from the archives. Among them a letter from Amelia's sister, written 6 months after Amelia's death, inquiring about Amelia's personal effects. Somber, focused. Specifically, a journal she had kept during the pandemic. The letter said Amelia had been deeply troubled by something she'd discovered weeks before she died, as she'd planned to report it to the authorities. Dark, ominous. Even more disturbing was another letter, from Dr. Finch to the hospital board, recommending room 407 be sealed permanently, because Amelia's personal effects contained observations, allegations, that could damage the hospital's reputation. Eerie, quiet. Then I heard it again, the soft, rhythmic tapping from within the walls. Creepy. And this time, Mr. Finch heard it too. He whispered that it had been going on for the past 10 minutes, and sounded like someone knocking, as if they were trying to get out. Still focused, I stood in the center of the room, listening to the persistent tapping and watching the temperature display continue its descent. Rational, disturbed, and while every rational part of my mind screamed for logical explanations, cold, tensing there in that cold, oppressive room, I began to understand the fear that clung to room 407. I told Mr. Finch with a voice steadier than I felt that I was going to call Dr. Croft because I thought we should consider moving him to a different room. He breathed, "Thank you," with relief evident in his voice. Dr. Croft arrived within minutes, by which time the temperature had returned to normal and the tapping had ceased. Mr. Finch appeared calmer, though he still glanced nervously at the corner. Professional, methodical, Dr. Croft conducted a thorough examination and reviewed the monitor readings. Analytical, serious, where everything appeared normal except for the documented temperature fluctuation. He then told Mr. Finch they were going to move him to room 403. As we prepared to transfer him, Mr. Finch grabbed my arm and said that before we leave, I should look at the wall behind the bed. 'Tis insistent, uneasy to really look at it. I approached the wall, and at first glance, it appeared perfectly normal. Observant, but as I examined it more closely, I noticed a subtle difference. Attentive where the paint in one section, about 3 feet square, was a slightly different color and texture, as if it had been patched and repainted long ago. I called for Dr. Croft to look, and he joined me, running his hand over the surface. The thoughtful, quiet, and musing that this section had definitely been repaired, probably years ago, judging by the way the paint had aged. Focused, routine, we completed the transfer of Mr. Finch to room 403, where he immediately seemed more at ease, and by 3 a.m. he was sleeping peacefully. Thoughtful, unsettled conjecture came, but my mind was racing and unable to concentrate. At 3:17 a.m., Dr. Croft appeared at my side carrying a thick folder, ominous, and said in a low voice that he thought it was time I knew the full story about room 407. He opened the folder to reveal years of meticulous documentation, including incident reports, patient statements, temperature logs, and even photographs, revealing tense, explaining he had been keeping records of unusual events in that room for over 15 years. Grief, and what happened tonight was not an isolated incident. Stunned, absorbed, I looked through the documents as a chilling pattern emerged. Slow, dark, where patients consistently reported visual and auditory hallucinations, unexplained temperature fluctuations, and equipment malfunctions. Creepy, specific, with the recurring detail of a woman in white. I asked Dr. Croft if he had ever investigated the history of this specific room. He replied that he tried, but the hospital's records from the early years were incomplete. Third, grave. Though he did know that during the 1918 influenza pandemic, the 4th floor was converted into an isolation ward for the most severe cases. At 11:47 p.m., I decided to ask Clara about these oddities and found her in the break room, sitting alone with a cup of tea. I asked if she minded me asking about the unusual routines and if there was something I should know about the unit. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression of caution and weariness and said I was very observant because most new nurses don't pick up on things so quickly. Inquisitive, when I asked what things, Clara glanced toward the door to ensure we were alone and asked how much I knew about the history of this hospital. Casual, I told her just the basics, that it was built in 1873 and one of the oldest in the state. She said that was the official history, but there's more to it. That room 407 has a history, and patients who are assigned there report things that they see and hear things. I asked what kind of things, and she described voices calling their names, shadows moving when no one is in the room, and the feeling of someone standing beside their bed, watching them. She paused and took a slow sip of her tea before telling me that 3 weeks ago they had a patient in that room. Creepy, detailed, a 45-year-old woman recovering from routine surgery who on her second night started screaming at 3:17 a.m. Disturbed, eerie, claiming a woman in an old-fashioned nurse's uniform was trying to give her an injection. Rational, I countered, falling back on my training, that hallucinations aren't uncommon in ICU patients. Clara replied that was what they thought, but when they reviewed the security footage, they saw the patient's room door opening and closing by itself at exactly 3:17 a.m. with no one entering or leaving, and the temperature sensors recorded a drop of 15 degrees in 2 minutes. Before I could process this, Dr. Croft's voice came over the intercom, asking me to come to the nursing station. Concerned, focused, I found him looking troubled as he told me they were receiving a new admission in about 30 minutes. Professional, neutral, a 52-year-old man with post-operative complications from gallbladder surgery who was stable but would need close monitoring. Dreadful. Hesitant, conflicted, and he confirmed it would be room 407 because they were at capacity everywhere else. I spent the next 20 minutes preparing the dreaded room, which was identical to the others. Creepy, yet as I worked, the atmosphere grew heavy, and the air became noticeably cooler. Eerie quiet, the silence in room 407 was the most unsettling part, as it seemed to absorb sound and create a pocket of quiet that felt almost oppressive. While checking the cardiac monitor, I heard it for the first time. Tense, spooky, a soft rhythmic tapping that was deliberate and distinct, coming from within the walls. Still nervous, but the sound ceased the moment I froze and listened intently. The patient, Mr. Samuel Finch, arrived at 12:45 a.m., conscious and alert, though clearly in discomfort from his recent surgery. Professional, attentive. As we transferred him to the bed, he seemed like any other post-operative patient, but his behavior changed only after we had settled him, as he kept glancing toward the corner of the room near the window. I asked if everything was all right, and he said there was someone standing over there. Haunted, raspy, his voice raspy as he pointed to the corner, describing an older woman in a white dress who had been watching us since we brought him in. I followed his gaze, seeing nothing but shadows, and told Mr. Finch that he had just had surgery and was on pain medication. Rational. So it was not uncommon to see things that aren't really there. He shook his head, his eyes wide with a strange clarity, saying he knew what medication can do because he was a pharmacist and understood the effects of drugs on perception. But he was telling me there was a woman standing right there, and she looked very sad, creepy tense. As I continued my work, Mr. Finch's eyes remained fixed on the corner, and he would occasionally nod. Uneasy, responding to an unheard voice. Stable signs were stable, and his pain was well managed, leaving no medical reason for such vivid hallucinations. Calculated, routine AM I left to complete my rounds, and when I returned 30 minutes later, shocked tense, I found him sitting bolt upright in bed, his face pale and agitated. Frightened, shaking when you said, the woman in the corner was trying to tell him something. Issuing nervous. His voice trembling as he explained she kept pointing to the wall behind his bed and saying something he couldn't understand. I looked at the wall he indicated, which was a blank space occupied by standard medical equipment, and told him there was no one in this room but us. He insisted I look at the temperature on the digital display. Startled, unsettled, pointing out it had dropped 10 degrees since I left. I checked the reading, and my breath caught in my throat, because the room temperature had fallen from 72 to 62 degrees, even though the thermostat was still set to 72 and the heating system was running normally. Mr. Finch quietly said it wasn't the heating system. Haunted, eerie, but it was her, and that every time she moves closer to the bed, the temperature drops. We continued the tour, and Eleanor introduced me to the rest of the night staff, including Dr. Julian Croft, a tall, thin man in his early 60s with graying hair and intense blue eyes. Leo Martinez, a respiratory therapist, and Clara Jenkins, a nursing assistant. Suspicious when he knew danobly competent, but an undercurrent of tension and a shared unspoken secret permeated the air. Eleanor finished her report at precisely 7 p.m. and departed with unusual haste. Casual, observant. At 7:30 p.m., Dr. Croft approached the nursing station with a stack of charts in hand and said my name was Aris, and that Eleanor told him I had excellent credentials. I thanked him and said I was looking forward to working there, and he nodded, his expression growing serious. He told me there were some particular aspects of working there that I should be aware of. Noting that Eleanor mentioned room 407 was empty, and that he preferred to keep it that way unless absolutely necessary. Direct, and if they did need to use it, he wanted me to follow specific protocols. He handed me a laminated card with a list of unusual procedures, including that all equipment in the room was to be checked every 2 hours, even if empty. Tense, mysterious, and any alarms from room 407 were to be investigated by 2 staff members, never one alone. Professional, uneasy, If a patient was assigned to the room, their vital signs were to be documented every 15 minutes. Creepy, bizarre, and most peculiarly, a digital recorder was to be placed in the room and checked each morning for unusual sounds. I began to ask Dr. Croft why these protocols were so specific and if there had been a particular problem with the room. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady, and said that in his 35 years of practicing medicine, philosophical, he had learned there are aspects of this profession that can't be explained by textbooks. Reflective grim, that this hospital is old, with a long history that sometimes influences the present. Before I could press further, an alarm blared from room 403, and we responded immediately as the demanding rhythm of ICU nursing took over. Focused, busy. For the next 2 hours, I was consumed by patient care, and it wasn't until nearly 10 p.m. that I had a chance to truly observe the unit. As the night deepened, a sense of unease began to creep in, and the first thing I noticed was the temperature. Cold. Disturbed, because despite the hospital's modern climate control, the ICU had distinct cold spots, particularly in front of room 407. Creepy. Where a palpable chill washed over me every time I walked past the door. Observant. The second was the behavior of the staff. Detailed. Leo Martinez, the respiratory therapist, performed his rounds with meticulous care, yet would always pause before entering a room, as if listening for something beyond the hum of the machines. Efficient. Paranoid. Clara Jenkins, the nursing assistant, was professional but had a habit of glancing over her shoulder when she thought no one was watching. Most significantly, there was Dr. Croft's routine, curious, where every hour on the hour he would walk the entire unit, his route always concluding at room 407, ritualistic, where he would stand outside the closed door for exactly 60 seconds before returning to the nursing station.